Hello. Um, so yeah, I thought I would record a video just going through the coursework once more. We did this a lot in lectures, but since you're going to be doing this over Christmas mainly, I want to make sure that you had everything that you needed. You do already have that, but I thought I'd record a video. So I'm going to do everything on Blackboard. So you've got the final assignment you need to submit is your project, kind of project. It's your final application. Yeah, I'm just going to go through what you do to submit it. So go to your Blackboard page, assessment and feedback, and then you're going to want to go to, depending what course you're on, you're either on the the 348 or the M48. So yeah, let's pretend you're on the M48, on the 348. So you've already done these two assignments. So we've got two assignments here. Your code and your code review, you've done that, you've got the mark, you've got feedback. Use the feedback that you got from both these things carefully. So I'm going to be marking the final coursework a little bit harsher, or a little bit, harsh is the wrong word. I don't like it when people use that word, but that's how you'll describe it, is you'll say harsh, but I'm going to be marking it more thoroughly, or more, that's not the right word either. I'm going to be following the mark scheme stricter. So this first one was kind of a test, was a way for you to learn the way I'm going to mark it. And this one is going to be much more like to the letter. So I'm going to click it. I can like fake being a student on Blackboard. In fact, if I change this to student preview mode, this is more like what you see. So I'm going to go to assessment and feedback, 348. Then I'm going to click on this and then click begin. So you will get now a list of questions. Now, one thing I forgot to say is that before you start, so yeah, I didn't plan this video, so it's going to be a bit, some of you are going to want to skip ahead to when I talk about the mark scheme maybe. So if you haven't already, go through the entire tutorial that's in the module content. So if we go to module content, teaching materials, and then actually is it in practical exercises, full tutorial from scratch to web application. So you should do that tutorial. I wouldn't want you to implement your own application in the way this is done. You should use scaffolding to help you, but this, if you do this tutorial, you'll actually understand what the scaffolding is doing. Like, be honest, if you haven't done that tutorial, you're not going to do well, so you need to do it. I've been saying that all year. So okay, assessment and feedback. You should read this overview first. Will it like me opening a new tab? Okay, so this is a full overview of the assignment, telling you exactly what you've got to do, and if you do not follow this guideline to the letter, you're going to get a very low mark. And I'm not going to, there's not going to be any, there's going to be zero tolerance to that. You need to do it the way that this is written. If you get a job in a software company and they ask you to do something in a certain way and you don't do it, they will show you where the door is. And that's what this module is kind of about, is to get you into that mindset of doing things in a special way and being specific. You are supposed to be professional software engineers. You need to do things to the letter, the way things are described. So yes, so like you should read through all of this very carefully. In particular, this part, which explains to you how you should be submitting it. So like, for example, a zip file titled as your student number, failing to do this will not be considered not meeting basic requirements. So you could have spent ages on your code, but if you call your zip file my web application, you're going to get 0 in the basic requirements section, because that's a basic requirement. If you were doing that for a customer and they asked you to do something and you didn't do it, then you might as well not have bothered. You need to submit a 60-second video showing that your application runs and meets the basic requirements, which means showing your application runs means clicking the run button and just very quickly just going through and posting something, like the basic requirements. So that's the requirements up here. Do it really quickly. No talk. You don't have to talk. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be listening. I just want to see that it works. Use OBS or something. There are lots and lots and lots of tutorials online how to record videos. Loads. And you need to submit that. I'll explain how to submit that in a moment. So as I said, read all the questions, and there's this is all a bit late now, but so I've said this is after I gave a date, so the date is going to be 20th of December. I'm not checking my emails from probably midday on the 20th. So, and when I say I'm not checking my emails, I really don't check my emails. I'm not going to be opening them up until after the deadline. So you need to do this before then if you want to get support. I would recommend aiming to get this done before the Christmas break. You've had more than enough time in labs, and we finished lectures a week early, so you had even more time actually to get this done. So I really highly recommend getting this done before Christmas, because you also have your other things to revise for. Okay, so that's that. Okay, we're going to go. So let's pretend. So we also have the mark scheme. So I'm going to open up this one. We'll look through this in a moment, but I want to just show you how to submit the assignment first. Here, so here we go. So we went through this. Those of you who were at the last lecture, we did do this, but I think it's worthwhile just doing it again. So you've got this recorded. Okay, so you submit your thing, and then there are a list of questions. So the first two questions are it says attach file. I've noticed that I'm giving you 10 points for submitting. That's not right. What's the total number? I need to fix that. So question 1, you'll be submitting your actual solution here, and then question 2 is submitting a video. So submitting your video. I might end up having to leave this 10 marks. So if you submit a video, you're going to get 10 marks. Congratulations. Whoops. Okay, so you've got those two things. That's where you upload your files. Again, we've done this for 3 years now. Blackboard never has an issue with this. It's actually, for this kind of thing, it's not that bad. And like I said, I think you should be aiming to do this in December, way before the deadline. You should be submitting it way before the deadline. Again, we have a zero tolerance for late submissions as well. So even if Blackboard is slow uploading something, that isn't an extenuating circumstance. You need to be submitting way before the deadline. The day before is what I would do. So then there are a list of questions, and these questions really are the kind of core of how I'm assessing your project. Because it's one thing to create a web application and people can just go and follow a tutorial and do it and it'll work and that's fine. But do you actually understand what's happening? And that's what these questions are about. Because here I'm going to say, for example, question 3, give an example, file name and number for each of the CRUD actions in your project: create, read, update, delete. So it's going to be very, you're going to give me a file and a line number for each, create is in this file. Please give me the folder as well and this line. And I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to say, yeah, they understand what that means. And then some stuff about bugs, and you can answer all those. These kind of things where it's so question 7 is kind of a higher towards the end of one of the rubric. Is justify why your web application is marketable. That is going to be that's a bit subjective. I'll be honest, but you have to, that's up to you to come up with a good argument that will convince me that what you've done is marketable. That kind of thing is kind of academic judgment, just from my experience, knowing the difference between something that's marketable and not. It's hard to give exact things what is and what isn't, but the reality is when you're getting to this level, it's much harder to measure something. It's more of a kind of feeling, or so that's what you've got to do here, is justify it. So yeah, that's kind of it. You should go through these. You can save this and update it, and you don't have to submit it. You can leave this here. I personally don't trust anything, so I would write like question 1, 2, 3. Just write in a Word document each of these questions and keep updating it, as I have said many times before. So this is what you need to submit. Let's just have a look. When is the deadline? So 8th of January. So that's what day is that? That is a Tuesday. So it's Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Okay, so you come back on the Monday, and then the Tuesday is the deadline. So really, and I've said it, I'm going to say this a lot, but you should be submitting this before January. Really aim to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the mark scheme now. So each of these, so the rubric is split in 2 sections, and you go along the side, and each of these boxes actually corresponds to a question in that in the Blackboard test. So you could just look at the Blackboard test. I would recommend, I've said to everyone, you need to look at the Blackboard test first before you start anything. But if you haven't, then do that now. What you should be thinking, the way you should be planning your work, is to, as you move up this rubric, things get more difficult. And particularly when you start getting to here. And what you should be doing is you should be planning your work so that you spend time, you get progress up to 50%, then you get implementation up to 50%, and then you get security up to 50%, and so on until you've got a good mark overall, and then you go to each one individually and say, right, what do I need to get the 2-1? What do I need to get the first? And that's when you actually go, don't get, if you spend, identity is probably a challenging one. So if you spend, 20 hours trying to get claim-based authorization working, you're then you might not have even started with the security one. So you want to, you need to balance your work for this. And again, that's not that isn't something that can be used as a extenuating circumstance, right? So you've part of your degree is learning how to manage your time, and that's something that ideally you should have learned in the first and second year, and then this third year is you're showing that you can do that. And we should be only giving degrees to people who can manage their time. That's kind of a part of the degree. So you get your degree in computer science, but having a degree is meant to say something about the way you work and the way that you are independent and that kind of stuff. And we need to make sure that when we mark things that we do that. Otherwise, it kind of devalues everyone's degree. So that's what this is all about. Okay, so let's go through each one of these. So progress is what it sounds like. So these progress and implementation. So so progress. So minimal progress, no working code. And as I've said, there are a few things that if you don't follow basic requirements, that will be considered no working code. So if you submit your file wrongly, that's considered no working code because you did not submit it correctly. So you'll get 0 in this section. So to pass, there's working code, but it's not progressed much beyond an introductory tutorial. Again, if you don't submit a video, I'm not going to, you'll get 0 here because you've not followed the instructions. So pass is a basic introductory MVC tutorial. So you've basically done the tutorial that I gave you. Basic create, read, update, delete, but nothing really specific. 2.2. You've implemented it, but there are a number of bugs, which would make it unsuitable to release it. And then we can have some bugs, but you can use it, no evidence of bugs, and then marketable. And also like getting 70, like I think there's like one thing I realized from after releasing the first coursework is that there is a definite misunderstanding, or there's a lack of understanding to what these grades mean. So in a university, and it's kind of like, I don't understand why this hasn't been told to you before, but a 2-1 is like the equivalent of an A grade. Okay, so 60% would be like getting an A. This is like going to be, a B and a C and then a fail. And then like a first is an A star, and a distinction is like just rare. So distinction is, if we say like giving 8% should only be to people who could go out there and do it today. If you're getting 8%, that should say that you are already working at a professional level. So it should be very rare. Like it really should be rare to get 80% or above. And usually only a handful of people get 80% in this module. Again, firsts should be relatively rare. That's showing what you have to what we are told that you have to do to get a first is you have to show you're working independently, which means that anything from 70% upwards is stuff that I shouldn't have taught you. It's stuff that you need to go and learn yourself. And that's important. That's what like a first is supposed to say. Like when an employer sees that, they think that. So that's how this mark scheme is designed. You kind of have to. So you have to think about. So like yes, you pay to come to university, but you also pay to go to the gym. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get fit. You have to put in the work there, and it's the same kind of thing here. Is that you've paid to come and you get support, but if you want to really excel, like you need to do independent work and show that you can. Okay, so that's the first one's relatively straightforward. The first two are relatively straightforward, like minimal progress. So to get a pass, like it works, but it's mostly been created using scaffolding, and Microsoft has automatically generated the code for you. So this next part, evidence you've independently implemented a significant proportion of the application. Some of you fell like short of this on your submissions to the first coursework, so you should have an idea of what I'm expecting. So 2-1, good practices as described in lectures. That's important because if you go to a company, different companies are going to have different ways of doing things. You have to do it the way that you've been told. So you have to follow good practices in terms of NVC. That means you're not doing things like using Razor pages. That's a different thing. That's a different model. I have told you to use Model View Controller. You have to use that pattern in the way that it was described in lectures. That's part of the learning outcomes. If you don't do that, you're not going to get 60%. You're going to get 50%. At first, you've used version control. Like that should be an easy win. And then finally, implementation is professional. So a lot of you got feedback of saying why your implementation wasn't necessarily professional. Security. So these ones, they don't necessarily increase in difficulty as you go along here. So I've said many times, if there is any serious security flaw in your application, you'll get 0 for the whole section. So for example, if you store passwords in plain text, or you come up with your own username and password system, that is a major problem, and that's very serious, and you're going to get 0, because it's important that if you go and get a job in web development, you are, people's personal data. You're going to be taking people's personal data, and we have I have an ethical duty to make sure that people who don't know how to do that well, like, don't get. We have to be fair. Like the example in engineering would be, if you do a structural engineering course, and you show that you don't know basic structures, we then don't want you to go build buildings. Or you do a medicine degree and you have some serious flaw in what you do or you're not good, we can't let everyone have a medical degree. It's the same kind of thing. Like, we can't let people who don't take security seriously get a web development, have evidence that they can do this. It's not right. So the pass is no obvious cross-site request. I'm not going to read through these. You need to look at these, and it's all in my notes of how these work. A lot of them, some of them the framework does for you, some of them it doesn't. So working with models, 10%. So you're going to get 0 if no database is used. So to pass, you need to have a database that's created from a model definition using code first. You should be using, or you must use, the entity framework for everything. If you create your own database because you didn't come to lectures and didn't know how to do it, you're going to get 0 in this section. Every year, a few people do that. And all that shows me is that you haven't attended lectures. So the next one up, data annotations are used effectively. Again, it's all in the lecture notes. Next one, at least one view specific model is used correctly. Like, really, you should be using view specific models everywhere. Again, like, look in the lecture notes, there's lots of stuff on that in the lecture notes. So database seeding is done correctly when the application starts in C#, not manually. And then the last one, a repository pattern is used to abstract away the data access layer, and dependency injection is used to access the database. So this is one I haven't taught in lectures because it's like a first and above, and it's one that this is for you to go figure out. Identity. So user accounts aren't used in any way. You get 0. To pass, users can log in, but it doesn't do anything in your application. You can log in with accounts, but it doesn't do anything. Users have different levels of authorization. So that's to get the 2-2. A claim-based authorization is implemented using role names. So some people have asked me questions about these next two and like, how are they different? They're very different. So you have normal roles like admin, user, and all that kind of stuff. And there's a role name system in the identity framework. You could, instead of having admin, you could have can post. So you could use role names to do claim-based authorization. But ASP.NET Identity actually has a claim system, which I haven't taught you because this is a first. This is what you need to do to get first. So this is stuff that I haven't taught you. And you can use that. So that is how you get this better mark. And then finally, like the most difficult thing, and this is very challenging, is that you give site owners an interface for creating and editing users and user roles. And you can interpret that in your own way. As long as I can get a list of users and assign roles, that's fine. So functionality. So again, this is another one. So functionality and progress. If you've not followed the basic requirements, then you're going to get 0 automatically. So the application is non-interactive website. You'd have to, I don't know how you could even do that. So basic requirements. So the application only has basic requirements. So if you haven't submitted it correctly, then it doesn't have basic requirements. And you'll show this in your video, right? So the web application has at least one additional working feature. So one extra thing that you've added yourself. The web application uses JavaScript to improve the user experience. So there are 2 lectures on JavaScript that we didn't go through. I gave you some extra time to work on your coursework, but those notes are there for you to look at. This one's actually easier than you think. And then finally, evidence of independent research, that you've implemented a feature which requires knowledge from outside what I've taught. And it's got to be very much outside of what I've taught. So you can also use the same extra function, like you can have, it says at least one additional working feature, that could be this, and then you can make that feature requiring knowledge from outside the course, and then you could get both. 2 birds with one stone. And then presentation. So you've got unchanged from original template. You're going to just like get nothing. And then if you've changed it, you get straight to a 2.2. If all your styling is done doing CSS, you get 2.1. If the layout changes appropriately as the browser is resized, you get the first. And then finally, the last one is the web application is unrecognizable as an ASP.NET project. So you could give it to me and I wouldn't know that it was created in ASP.NET. It's kind of like if you know this idea of you can spot a WordPress website from like 10 miles away. Well, you can kind of start to do that with ASP.NET, these kind of projects. So like this is challenging. This is really challenging to make this. Like this is, again, I don't give this. This doesn't. All of these last ones, not many people get them. So don't spend all your time trying to get one of these when you haven't already got the pass mark in all of these. And you might find it easier to look through the questions, because the questions are what I'm going to be marking. The questions like relate to these rubrics, but they're kind of the same. But you can then see specifically what you need to do. One thing I would say is you just need to do what you need to do to tick these boxes, which like the number of hours of labs we had this year was enough to do all that. So don't spend lots and lots and lots and lots of time. Try and, if you're spending a lot of time, you might be doing too much, and there's no point, because I just marked the mark scheme. You won't get extra credit for spending more time on it. It's marked by the mark scheme, so just do that. So hopefully that was helpful. Good luck. Have a good Christmas. Have a good New Year, and I shall see you in the new year at Groganog or something, probably. Bye. And if you haven't done it already, do the module feedback, please. It really helps.